Hello, everyone. Today I'm being joined by Alan Bahr of Gallant Knight Games, among many other talents. I have known Alan for a number of years. When I first met him, he was introduced to me as a role-playing game designer. But since then, I have learned he does tabletop game design. He writes for comic books. He does podcasting. He writes for other publishers. He is a writer in general. He does publishing. Pretty much if it comes with gaming and writing, it seems like, Alan, you have had a touch in it, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm real excited to be here.
Okay, I appreciate this. We don't really have an agenda of anything we talked about. I mean, which is shocking because I've actually reviewed a number of your games that people can check
Yeah.
out on Guildmaster Gaming and other sites that I've written for.
Yep.
But we just kind of got talking before and said, yeah, let's do this and let's just have a chat. So
I mean,
we
those are
have
the
no
those are
idea of what we're going to cover.
oh boy, that can't go badly.
So let me just start off with one thing. How did you get started as a game designer?
As a game designer, oh, I've told the story a few times, and it's now so far in the annals of my memory that I'm probably gonna get details wrong.
Oh, that's okay.
Back
Just tell it how you remember it.
back in the heyday of the early D20 boom, the 3.0, 3.x era, if you're familiar with the history of D&D, this would have been early 2000s, 2001, 1000 through 2004. Wizards of the Coast had a forum on their website. For the younger viewers, a forum is like where you would send messages in not real time, and then you would reply in a thread. It's like what Discord does now, but slower. Um, I had to explain a forum to my younger sister the other day, so it comes up. And they would have these design competitions, and I was young. I was middle school aged for most of that, and I kept throwing my work into these design competitions, and it was terrible work, terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. And this continued through into college. And somebody, and I wish I still had my access to those emails and stuff, but somebody took pity on me and reached out and said, "Hey, here's some tips." They were I believe they were a freelancer. I don't think they were a full WotC employee or anything. But they were a freelancer who reached out and like, "Hey, I see you keep submitting. Your stuff isn't really improving, so you don't seem to be figuring this out. So let me give you some pointers." And that was a big help. They said it much nicer than that, obviously, but the general thrust was, "Hey, if you're going to keep submitting, let's at least make it readable." And it kind of just snowballed from there. I got more into the idea of designing games. I kept homebrewing stuff, and around 2014, a little bit earlier, probably, Howard Taylor of Schlock Mercenary approached me. He knew I was interested in it. He approached me to make a pitch for an RPG adaptation of Schlock Mercenary. I did. They liked it. We published it. It went gangbusters on Twitter, and I was like, "Hey, I seem to be okay at this. Let's keep doing it."
Okay.
So it kind of just there's no degrees for this really. There are some out there, and I've always wanted to take a class at college about game design, especially tabletop game design. But a majority of game designers are sort of self-taught,
Yeah. So
and
I
they
do know
tend to follow some sort of path.
you did
Like
have some little things published before Schlock Mercenary, didn't you? Because I remember when Planet Mercenary came out, and I thought
um, Planet Mercenary came out after I'd already published some stuff as Gallant Knight Games,
oh, okay,
but the design and all the Kickstarter and everything was the first thing I did
all
that would
right,
have had my name attached to it. So
okay,
it happened, and then there was production, and in between the release and production, I managed to release Tiny Frontiers Revised and Mechas and Monsters.
okay.
So
I see how it works. So just to give people an idea, now that was like 2014, so almost 9 years ago,
oh
roughly. Just
yeah,
a guess, how many games do you think you have now written since then?
written or published?
Published. How many games do you have out there in the market?
Over a
Just a rough
hundred,
idea.
over 100,
Over a
easy.
hundred.
Yeah,
So
including some that are no longer available. And that's counting. I'm counting ones I was the primary sort of lead on.
okay,
I'm not counting ones where like I tossed in 1,000 words or a little adventure or something for a friend or something, like.
yeah.
But if you count things like I've produced, I project managed, I've added text to clean up or developmentally edited adventures is several hundred probably.
Okay. So that kind of tells people that even if you start out with crap, you can eventually get to what you want to do.
I'm not saying my stuff still isn't crap. I just make a lot of it.
I would say it's not crap. I've seen enough of it. I'll admit I've ran your games, the systems at different conventions.
Yep.
People have really enjoyed it. I know the Tiny D6 series, a lot of
Yep.
people really enjoy the simplicity of it, the mechanism. Seems like you enjoy minimalist games more. Would that be a true statement that you enjoy that, or that's what you
If
find easier to
you
write?
well, they're actually harder to write, and I like a challenge.
Okay.
It's easy to keep adding rules and text to a game in a sense, right? You can always add more detail to a rule. Stripping it down to a functional balanced basis is actually, in my opinion, more difficult than creating a very rules heavy game.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are people who disagree with me, and I'm sure their points are probably very valid. But I've always felt like it's really easy to just keep adding stuff. I can add more critical hit tables. I can add more hit locations. I can add more skills. I can always keep narrowing the focus of various things until there's 200 skills in a game, you know? But trying to reduce things to something that fits on a 3x5 note card and is still playable and understandable and learnable is, in my opinion, at least for me, more difficult. And so I find that a challenge.
I would have to agree with you on that in terms of writing too. It's to me, it's harder to write a piece of flash fiction, which you have to get everything into a story in under 1,000 words, than having 4 to 6,000 words to actually tell your story.
Right.
So,
And everybody has different skill sets. I know some authors who would disagree with me. They would say it's very easy to write minimally. It's very difficult to add more stuff.
yeah,
So I think it's just sort of your experience, your mindset, your approach. There's a lot of things that go into it.
yeah, I can agree with that. I understand that. So, your first, like you're saying, Tiny Frontier. So that's a sci-fi.
Yep.
Schlock Mercenary, Planet Mercenary, the game, sci-fi.
Sci-fi.
So, what
Mechas and Monsters, my third
yeah.
game, sci-fi. Yeah.
So I got to ask, what's your favorite genre? Is it sci-fi or
Superheroes and spies.
superheroes and spies?
Yep.
Okay.
Not together, but just in generally superheroes and espionage. So they kind of flip them or together. I won't complain. That's peanut butter and chocolate right there. But
oh, wait a minute, there's a new idea.
yeah. Oh no, I've written that. We're good.
Oh, okay.
But like that's sort of those are my two favorite genres to play in and to write in
Okay.
when it comes to gaming.
So
Science fiction and fantasy get a lot of my work because those are sort of the two largest mediums that sell. Superhero games, unfortunately, generally don't sell very great unless they have a IP attached to it. It is my experience as a publisher. And there are a lot of legacy, champions, hero system. There's these legacy superhero games like Mutants and Masterminds that do sell very well. But new ones in the market tend to have an uphill battle. So
they got a lot of superheroes to compete against to get out there.
well, and superheroes are very recognizable now, especially with the advent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the last 15 years.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. The game industry, and I think this is a byproduct of D&D being sort of the progenitor in a large sense. The game industry skews towards fantasy when fantasy generally is not the biggest genre in mass media or pop culture. I'm not going to say it's not big. You have Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, books, all that stuff's out there. But when it comes to people consuming tabletop, fantasy is king, is not a question.
Yep.
And I think sci-fi is second.
Yeah. I
Whereas,
agree with that just from what I've seen on my side of it.
right. And if you were to look at, what comes out on TV, you definitely would say Star Trek and Star Trek and Star Wars are bigger than fantasy. Right? Across the board, longer franchises in visual mediums.
But then again, a lot of people argue, is Star Wars truly science fiction or is it fantasy?
Does it matter?
The structure is very fantasy based.
Sure, but that argument, Star Trek's a Western, at least the original series, right? So
yeah. Yep.
If you're splitting hairs, then sure. I guess we can get into that.
It was pitched, what was it pitched as? Wagon train in space?
Train to the stars, yeah. Yep. Wagon train to the stars.
So
which, it's an interesting genre, hair splitting argument, I suppose. But I think to the average consumer, they'd be like, doesn't matter. Like it's Star Wars, Star Trek. They're both in space. They're sci-fi.
It's all genre.
Yeah, it's all genre definitions that nobody agrees on anyway. So
kind of going with gaming, I know you play a lot of games. just to keep up
Yeah.
on it and just having fun for your thing. So what is your favorite? So when we talk about your favorite genre, is that your favorite genre to run a game in,
It's my favorite genre to work in.
to work in?
I love writing superhero RPGs. I love writing spy RPGs. I could write those all
Okay.
day long.
So what do you like as a game master? If you're
Oh, when I am running
yeah,
games, I tend to gravitate towards games that are far crunchier than the ones I make, actually. I think if you played in my personal group, you'd be like, Alan runs games that are far more complex than the stuff he publishes most of the time. That's not to say I don't run simpler or more minimalist games. I do. I am in 5 to 6 weekly RPGs, but but a lot of my personal games tend to be things like Pendragon, which I wouldn't call Pendragon complex, but I certainly would say is crunchier than a lot of the stuff I write. I run a lot of Pendragon. I run a lot of Star Trek Adventures recently. I also just don't like running my games because I work on them all day, so it feels like work to pull them out and run them. Um, but most of my stuff would be crunchy. It probably leans more fantasy, though I love historical style gaming. Like currently, right now, we're playing Shot and Splinter, which is a Napoleonic Age of Sail, think Master and Commander,
okay.
oceanic hex crawl. So our players have a boat. They are sailing from hex to hex, trying to capture the Charlemagne. The British sailors are trying to capture a French ship as their mission, and they move from one hex to the other. They're rolling on like weather. They're trying to manage the ship and their resources and their rations. And there's almost no fantasy elements to it. The setting and the game as presented does have that, but I'm not touching them. They're not getting used at my table. It is straight, black powder Age of Sail. That's the kind of stuff I like. It's a very razor sharp rule set, very classic old school style stuff. You would not call it crunchy, but there's a lot of procedure to it, which I enjoy.
Okay. So that's when you're running a game. Let's flip you on the other side of the screen. If you're
Mm-hmm.
playing,
It's probably at a convention or playtesting for a friend. That's
but
about it.
that's about it. But if you're
I
playing, what would you like to play?
Oh, it's funny. This is the third time this has come up today in conversation. um, I I also like playing historically themed games, usually with a
Okay.
little bit of like a dark fantasy element to them. Um, or just grittier fantasy. I love me a good big damn hero. Um, but I tend to find I enjoy it more when I am consuming fiction than playing.
Okay.
Unless it's a superhero RPG. When it comes to superhero RPGs, four color Captain America all the way. Like I don't do this Punisher crap. Um, but anywhere else, I definitely like have, and part of that is I think because as players we have different moral compasses to a degree or different ethical scales where things slide around on. You know, nothing extreme, but everybody has a different view of what constitutes a white lie or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that comes out in gaming, and it can if you have a particular vision of what heroism is, I think in a lot of ways you can end up conflicting with other players subconsciously when they do stuff that you wouldn't view as heroic. And existing as a gamer in that moral gray area is just a lot easier on the mental processing load. And so as a player, we tend to end up there. Um, but I love I mean, one of my dream games to play someday would be the classic Victory Games James Bond RPG. I've never been able to play it. I have all the books. I've hunted them down over the years. I got my last one yesterday, finally. Now I have all of the books for that game. And I love it. I love it to death.
I'll have to admit, I remember playing James Bond back in the 80s. And back here in my closet, yes, I do have some James Bond material. And I also was a big Top Secret fan.
I've got the new edition of Top Secret. I don't have any of the previous stuff.
Yeah, I
But
had the original, and I don't know if you remember, they had a mini module that you could run that came with their screen of Rescue the President. And I think I ran that game for other people like 30 to 40 times. So
nice. Well, next time we get together, we should play Top Secret or James Bond.
we'll definitely get some different
Yeah.
spy game going or something.
Yeah.
I know I have some other people in my group that would love to do some more spy games.
There we go. But
Uh,
yeah, so for me, things that are morally gray tend to be where I land, historical, fantasy themed, stuff like that
okay.
as a player. And that's primarily due to what's also available. Like if I could convince somebody to run some of these weird RPGs I purchased, I would absolutely do so, and they would not fit in that genre. But I
Too
think
bad we
there's
live
a
too far apart.
well, right. I think there's a mix of what's available and what is sort of the closest thing I can be comfortably happy. Right. There's this weird push pull of this is what I want to do. This is what the GM, who is the one who has to do all the work, is offering. So where do I align these two things that maybe don't quite match up? Right.
Yep. Boy, do
So
I understand that one.
right. And so when people say, oh, what would be your favorite thing to play? And I'm like, I don't know. Something with a good GM and I'd probably like it. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah. It's kind of like just in games in general, because I
Right.
review so many games. I have people always say, what's your favorite game to play? And it's like, it really depends on who I'm with.
A good one, you know.
Yeah. If I've
One with
got a
my
crowd of
friends,
people
like
that are heavy into strategy, we're going to go a strategy game. If we got somebody that we know in the group that
right.
they don't like it, we're not playing strategy game. So
Oh, if we're talking board games, I'm 100% like a 4X. Give me 8 hours of moving little wooden chips around the board kind of guy.
so you like the heavier wargaming?
Oh yeah, yeah. I love wargaming. It's ironic because most of my games back there are not that, but I have a lot. You can see kind of over there. There's some of my GMT games like Command and Colors, Jacobite Rising. I got a bunch of that kind of stuff. I love that stuff. Like
Yeah, I think
the stuff that you
somewhere
have to
over
leave set up for several weekends.
I understand that, because over here I've got Across 5 Aprils, if you've ever seen.
Oh yeah, hey, that's a great game.
So, and when you were mentioning the ones before, one of the games I used to play a lot when I was younger was Wooden Ships and Iron Men.
I have that. I
I
still
wish I
have that.
still
Yeah.
did. I wish I still.
I Where did I get it? I think I actually grabbed it off Noble Knight one day because it was on sale and I had like a gift certificate or something. People will just give me for like my birthday or presents now. They just give me like Noble Knight gift certificates because they're like, we don't know what RPGs Alan has and he buys weird stuff, so let's just give him a gift certificate. He'll figure it out.
So since we're kind of talking, I know you also have done some board games, games, I should say, non-role playing games, because
Yes.
card games and other ones.
Yep.
So kind of going between the two, what would you say is kind of a similarity or differences in trying to develop out the mechanics or the playability of an
Oh,
RPG versus another system?
so for context, I've only ever published one non-RPG game that I've designed, to the best
Oh,
of my
okay.
knowledge, and that was Moods of the Mad King.
Yep, I've got it over here.
Yep. And that's
Yeah,
really difficult.
I was going to say I'm kind of surprised, because I thought you had actually been involved in more.
I have been involved in more. I play tested, I've helped consult or
Okay.
produce or serve as like a project manager, but as a designer and a writer, I think that's the only one I've been significantly involved in.
Okay.
Aside from, sort of, hey, this would word better if you punched it up this way or whatever, right? Which it feels a little bit like cheating to claim that because, you know,
Oh, when you get in your position, or like what I get all the time, is people are always asking for what's the critique on how it plays, because
right,
they know we've done so many.
right.
So
It was hard to do. I think for me, the difficulty designing it is actually overshadowed by the difficulty in producing and marketing and publishing it because it's so different than RPGs. Like, I don't want to say the designing wasn't difficult. It was, but it was also a very small, minimalist, kind of almost trick taking card game. If you played Love Letter, it probably closest to that if you're
yeah,
going to draw a
yeah,
parallel.
that's a good one.
So I would say, well, that was difficult. It didn't feel any more difficult than designing an RPG in that sense. But it was the publishing side of it that was far different than what I expected. It was much harder. And it definitely feel like that was where I learned a lot and also learned that I dropped the ball a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotta try some things to find out what you
Yeah.
really like to do.
Yeah. You always got to try new things, especially as a small business. We're always trying to find a way to, access a new audience, hook in a new group that might enjoy what we make and spread them into the other stuff we make. So you're always trying to try to push the envelope a little bit. And that was one I'm sure we'll revisit at some point. I would love to do We've got a couple sort of card games, like 1v1 card games I would like to tackle at some point. I've designed them pretty thoroughly, but they just have never quite worked out. And the costs for a card game are expensive because you have to do a lot of art for a little bit of text.
Yeah.
Whereas with an RPG, I can do, one piece of art for every 4 to 6 pages. I'm doing one per card all of a sudden. And if I have 50 cards, that's not a big deck of cards. That's a lot of art, right? So they are just different.
Yeah, I understand how that goes. I'm actually going to be next week. I'm talking with a developer who's an artist that did a
Okay.
collectible card game.
Oh, which one?
Sean Ricks is his name.
Okay. What game do you
And
do?
I Magi. It's one that just finished up on Kickstarter.
Oh, I saw the Kickstarter for that. I didn't back it. I'll have to take a look.
Yeah, he's got some pretty interesting art. I also known him for doing cover work
Okay.
for
Cool.
a lot of books. People I know.
Yeah.
That's how I ended up meeting him the first time.
All right.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe a future collaboration.
There you go.
So you've done all this gaming stuff, and it sounds like
Yes.
that's where you kind of got your mainstay. But I know it is not the only thing you do.
Yeah. So I've written comics and we've got more comics coming. The first comics we wrote were tied into our superhero RPG as like a Kickstarter stretch goal. They had an adventure at the back, which you actually played with me at a convention.
Yes, that's
It
all.
was a big multi-table battle a giant mad science magic kaiju thing from Atlantis.
Yep.
And we've got more comics. And the new comics are coming separately from Gallant Knight Games. They're actually going to be non-related to any of our IPs. So they're just kind of a personal project because I'm not great at writing prose, like long form prose.
Yep.
I struggle to maintain a linear plot, I guess you would say. Like I can get a couple thousand words and I'm like, I'm out. That's it. I don't know. Where does this go from here? The people will figure it out. But comics I find very enjoyable to read and to write, and it works better for my creative brain, I guess. I don't really know. I tried not to delve too deeply into that one. I'm afraid I might not like the answers. So it's kind of a fantasy. I pitched it as Game of Thrones meets Dragon Ball Z meets The Last Kingdom. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a little weird. I'll be when we're closer, we're still being like penciled. I just got the last pages today on pencils. So it's gonna be inked and colored, and then I'll script it and letter it. But when it's out, I'll definitely come back on and we can talk about that because I think that'll be a whole different conversation.
Yeah, that will be. I have done some work with some comic book people here in Salt Lake.
Okay.
So yeah, I understand that's a whole different process for writing.
Yeah, I really enjoy it and I really want to do more of it. Like I find it very fulfilling creatively in a different space than gaming. Like they're both fulfilling creatively, but they just stretch different muscles, right?
Yep.
And so I definitely want to do more of that.
I have been told that some of the work in putting together a comic book and writing the initial script to kind of say what's in the panels is a little bit reflective of screenplay writing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I have done that as well.
You have also
As,
done screenplays. See,
as well as producing small films. Yeah. I've done some production work for small independent productions too.
Oh, okay. That's another area that maybe we'll have to talk about someday.
It was 15 years ago, and it was only when I was helping some friends who were film students at BYU. So,
and it sounds like with the way that's in tone that you are done with that area of.
Would I revisit it with the right project? Absolutely. I have already started one small business and a couple others. I'm not about to start a filmmaking business. That sounds terrible. As somebody I've done enough with that and am so far removed from it and how the modern landscape works, I don't even know what I would look at.
So it'd probably
I'm just
if
like, if you want me to co-write a script,
idea.
Email me people if you want me to co-write a script. That's as far as I'm going to go down that road, probably.
All right. That sounds like a lot of fun. There's a lot of different things. So,
yeah.
I mean, you've got a lot of fires going on, a lot of,
Yep.
all sorts of different things. It's really kind of amazing to me to think about it. But I do understand because doing a small business type thing, you're always looking at different angles of what to do.
Yep.
So right now, what would you say is the big project you're kind of working on that is either coming out now or in the near future that people can kind of look forward to?
Sure. So we just dropped Shadows of a Dying Sun, which was a game 10 years in the making. I started designing it right after Planet Mercenary. It's been through a lot of iterations. I was finally happy with it and found an artist who sort of evoked that Baroque dying earth style genre that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that just dropped. It's done pretty well. We've already achieved silver bestseller status on Drive Through RPG.
Okay.
And it just came out in print like Monday, so you can get it in print and PDF now. So like 2 days ago. And coming up, we got a couple Kickstarters. We're doing one for Carrion Lands. We've got a couple licensed products that I can't say anything about yet that are coming, as well as some more tiny D6 big book style Kickstarters. We call them big books because they're big genre sort of guideline books. And then we do these little subgenre books throughout. So
Yeah, those are the ones like with the micro settings within them.
Yep. Things like Tiny Cthulhu, Tiny Dungeon, Tiny Frontiers, ones where the genre covers a wide swath, like we were talking about Star Trek versus Star Wars, right?
Yep.
One book can cover all of that, but you got to write it, right? Whereas something like Tiny Beach Patrol, it only covers one thing, and it covers lifeguards. So it's only like a 50-page little sort of zine style book.
Yep.
So,
and if people want to read about those, if you check out my blog, you can find reviews for, like you're saying, Beach Patrol, Tiny Frontiers, Mecha and Monsters,
Wastelands, I believe, is on there.
Wastelands, for Blood and Coin and Blood.
Oh yeah, for Coin and Blood, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you do the first edition or the second with that one?
I don't remember.
Huh?
Which one I have.
Well, let me know, and if you don't have the second one, I'll make sure you have a PDF so you can do it. But
yeah, well, we've got a lot of things going on, so yeah, I mean, it's always been fun working with you on those, because I'll tell you this much: just my group, whenever I say I've got one of your games that we want to play test, even if it's one that you've said that you didn't really like, every time they've enjoyed it.
Well, that's good. I am sure my criteria for liking my work is far different than the average person's.
Yeah.
So,
and to give people like Beach Patrol, we took it on a totally different thing, where I know you have it set up for Baywatch.
No, it's a separate and distinct IP, unrelated whatsoever to any slow motion related media.
Well, we kind of spoofed it around a little bit, took one of the ideas that you had in the book, and our crew, instead of being out on the beach, was at a summer camp.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it.
Teenagers at a summer camp, and we basically created a Scooby-Doo style mystery.
Yes. Oh, that would be a great. Oh God, I don't even think about that. Did you combine it with Stranger Stuff from Fat Goblin Games?
Oh no, this was before that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
this was just
that would
straight
be...
up with and it ended up being somebody trying to get the lot camp to close for lot purposes.
That's perfect.
It fit very, very well. So there's a lot of things, like you said, that can go in all sorts of ways. It's a lot of fun. So do you have some other projects besides games that you're working on that you're kind of looking forward to?
The comic, I have some fiction stuff coming out where I'm publishing fiction. We're getting rolling on that. We're the last couple of years have made setting up a small press hard, and so we're trying to figure out the best way. Once you figure out printing and distribution, then Twitter gets bought by somebody and it becomes harder to promote, and so you have to figure out what you're doing. And there's every time we think we have it locked down, somebody moves the goalposts a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's fine. We're getting really close. We have our first couple books are in editing and production, so they'll be coming out soon. We should be launching 3 or 4 books in the next 6 to 8 months.
Oh wow, that's a big push.
Well, and these have been kind of sitting there, so I want to get them out. The authors have been real patient as we have tried to figure this stuff out. But we're only aiming to do 3 or 4 a year. So once we get these out, we'll do a wave 2 probably in another 8 months or so, yearly magazine kind of thing. So
okay.
I've got some more games coming out from Osprey Games. They've announced an expansion to my Templar Conspiracy RPG, Heirs to Heresy, Faith and Fear, which has a bunch of expansion material, introduces solo play, stuff like that. I've got more work in the pipeline with them. I don't know. I've been talking to some video game companies about stuff. I have no knowledge about that whatsoever. So I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but yeah, there's all kinds of things. Like I like doing new things. So I love cooking. I've learned to blacksmith. I make candles. I make soap. You know, I like learning new skills and trying new things. So I'm always pushing some of my spare time into something different.
I bet that makes for a very interesting home life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure my wife would use the word interesting in air quotations, but yeah, I
Yep.
think so.
I'm one of those people. It's like looking at this stuff behind me. Everybody usually asks, "Oh, is that Legos?" I go, "No, that's for building dungeon stuff."
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a bunch of that kind of stuff. It's great.
Now from Hearst Arts, that's what this is.
I've got a mix of Dwarven Forge, a bunch of 3D printed stuff I printed on my 3D printer.
Okay.
So
Now I've got a
I do have
little
some
bit of
Hearst
Dwarven
arts.
Forge over here on the other side.
Oh,
Yeah, I got
some
into
of the
years ago.
Warlock tiles
Yeah.
from. I made one Halloween. I always run a big Halloween game, and one Halloween I made a multi-level castle out of Hearst blocks that you could take off each level, and then I ran lights, like little Christmas lights for torches that would light up when you turned them on, and
Wow.
all kinds of stuff. It was great.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty amazing work with that.
You can do some nut stuff, yeah, with the
Yeah.
Hearst stuff.
So great stuff.
Yeah,
So in the writing, the publishing
yeah.
stuff, you mentioned that you're doing it, but what genre are you basically working in, or is it open, or
For the fiction publishing,
yeah?
primarily weird fiction, horror, gothic stuff I
Okay.
like to read that I feel I don't get enough of. Or new voices I want to hear. There's some like we got some like Gnostic horror stuff coming.
Oh,
It's kind of out there, philosophical horror. I like pushing boundaries a little bit. Nothing crazy, but I have a lot of weird interests, and I like to see those reflected in things, and so I'm always looking for things that are like that. And when I don't find it, I go, how can I make sure this thing can be found? But I can't be the only person who wants to, read weird philosophical Gnostic horror like that. I can be. Right. Yeah. See, so but we're also sort of it's a small press. So basically my criteria is would I want to if I bought this off the shelf and read it and liked it, would I like it? Right. And would I be happy I bought it? If yes, it's probably worth publishing, even if it's not quite in our wheelhouse.
okay. I can relate to that. I actually have done some work with another small press that's along those same lines.
Right.
And they just started theirs up within the last couple of years.
Okay. Was this
Cody Langgill with Timber Ghost
yes.
Press.
Yes. Yep. I talked to him when I was at Quills. So
when you're talking about the Gnostic horror, his debut book that he came out with 21 grams.
Yep. Oh, I read it. It's great. It's part of what started me.
Okay.
This is what kind of started me on this road and talking to him and stuff. Yeah. So he's great.
All right. So
yeah. Yeah.
So let's kind of jump around a little bit again.
Yeah.
I do know your general take on this, but I just find that it's something that people need to kind of think about. If you have someone that comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want to be a game designer. I want to do what you're doing." What would be your advice?
Don't. It'll be easier if you just, I don't even know. No. So, I mean, the first thing I would say is that's awesome. We need more game designers. And I would say the first thing I would tell you is play as many different games as you can. Even if you don't like them, or you're like, if you're like, I really want to write supplements for X rules, that's great, but play as many different games as you can. Nothing makes me sadder than seeing a Kickstarter where somebody for their first Kickstarter is like, we did away with classes. Look how innovative we are. And in my head, I'm going, that hasn't been a thing since D&D came out. Like RuneQuest doesn't have class, right? Like,
yeah,
I can point at basically every RPG that's not a D20 hack, and there's rarely classes. Right? They might have a different name, kits, professions, whatever. But even then, they don't work the same way. There's no levels per se or whatever, right? Yeah. It's a very siloed sort of experience. And so it always makes me sad to see that because there's such a great breadth of these indie games out there that for other people to experience. And they make you a better designer because you learn how to approach problems you might not have thought about solutions for. And so I'm always trying to play and write as in many different rule sets as possible. And my other advice is talk to people who are experienced. Everybody I know in the game industry is pretty giving with their time and advice. Really work at learning what advice works for you and what advice doesn't, because not every advice works for everybody. My way of doing things will not work for everybody who wants to publish because they're not me, right? And then I would say you just got to sit down and do the work. Like it's unglamorous, it's boring. You cannot turn around and have a game that is finished and without playtesting it. And playtesting it takes time and effort, and sourcing art takes time and effort. Like there's just work. It is work. It's not playing games all day. It's not being like, oh, I'm a game designer and people are going to give me money. You have to just sit down and do the work. And it's not fancy. It's not fun. Marketing is really hard in the smaller side of the industry, which I'm not even sure I technically qualify for at various times. I know we're definitely don't qualify as what are they? Is it small press? No, we're a small press, but we're not an indie publisher by the standards of some RPG marketplaces. We're certainly not as big as somebody like, Pinnacle or Green Ronin or ISO or Wizards, but we're also definitely more successful than probably the average indie publisher in terms of just market reach and longevity and stuff. I mean, I can make my living doing this full time, which is rare, but it's just work. Like I probably work 12 to 16 hours a day every day, except maybe some weekends. But even then, I'm playing games, or my wife says I have a game design stare that when my brain goes off into this vacant look, I'm thinking about games and game rules. And I'll invariably like just be like, hang on, I gotta go upstairs for a minute. And then I'll end up working for like an hour as I write something down and flush it out. It's just work like any job. It's not all fun and games, despite being in the game industry.
That's kind of like what you said. It took 10 years to get the one to market that you just got coming out.
And that was, I will say, that was partially me being really picky about my vision for it. I could have definitely released it before. I just didn't want to.
But when you say that you're telling people that they should play games,
yeah,
they have to get a hold of them. And I know, again, this is another one of those I kind of know the answer to. Just to give people an idea, how many role-playing games
not going to answer that.
Do you have?
Enough that I have to have a spreadsheet to manage what I have because I forget sometimes.
And just to let people know I have now over 500, and I know you got me well outclassed from there.
I have you outclassed by,
I was going to say 5-6 times.
More than that.
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my last spreadsheet, not counting duplicates, was close to 3,200 different board games on my, or role-playing games on my shelf.
Yep.
And part of that is I would probably have this collection even if I wasn't working in the game industry. Right. Like I just love role-playing games. It was my favorite hobby before I went into this. It will be my favorite hobby when I leave. Or I'm kicked out or they force me to stop. Like I just love role-playing games. Like I would be buying them either way. Is it nice that it's a benefit for my job? Absolutely. Right. Definitely makes me better at this.
Yeah.
But everybody has a thing they love. And for me, that hobby is role-playing games. But it's also my job is no longer just a hobby. And so I do approach it and treat it like a job. I'm not saying you have to have as many games as I do. Please don't. It's not healthy. And then when you move, you have to move them all. It's not worth it. Buy a lot of PDFs. It's just easier. I'm an idiot.
Well, it's kind of like they say to writers, you have to be a reader to become a good writer. And right. I think it's kind of what you're saying here is if you really want to, if it's board games, if it's role-playing games, if it's like if you want to get into like what you're doing with comics or any of it,
right,
you've got to know what it is you're competing against with what you're creating.
I don't think it's even competition as much as it is just understanding the space you're operating in makes what you're doing more efficient and better. And for me, reading a role-playing game and getting excited, even all this, I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years now. Almost. It'll be 10 years next year. Holy crap. I still get excited to read a new role-playing game. Like my wife will catch me. I'll run upstairs with a book. I'm like, hey, let me explain this to you because in this book they did this thing and it's super cool. or somebody will explain a mechanic to me, and I'll be like, "Whoa, I never thought of that. That's so cool." And I still get that same like I was 18 thumbing through the rack at the game store, right? Like, oh look how cool this art is. Like I still get that. I still have that. Has it changed how I think about it? Yeah, sure. Or how I find it, or where I find it, absolutely. Whereas I used to be excited about a prestige class and complete adventure, I'm probably not going to be excited about something in a D&D supplement as much anymore, because I've seen a lot of that over the years. I've seen a lot of variations on that over the years, right? Yep. For me, it's a lot of stuff like I get from Zine Quest, or I find from smaller press publishers and various boutique websites or stores. Sometimes I get excited.
Ideas, the nuggets that come out that people come up with.
I just get excited. Like I still to this day will get a new game and be like, I want to run this. And my campaign group will be like, no, we just switched. Stop it. I'm like, but it's exciting. It is what I want to play. Like that hasn't changed in 10 years. And for me, just consuming games, both playing, reading, that's what feeds that. And I think the day I lose that is the day I'll probably quit making games. When I am no longer excited by what other people are making, I don't think I want to be doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, don't buy thousands of games, guys. It's bad. It's not a good idea. But do play a lot of games. Find groups, find stores. You don't have to play them all the time, but like get a session or two in a Pathfinder 2e. It does some really cool ideas. I have been raving about it since it came out, saying people need to be looking at how they approach that D&D style paradigm and move the needle in a really smart way. Play weird indie games that you wouldn't like. Play games in genres you don't like, because they will push you to experience new things and think about problems and conflicts, both in mechanics and narrative, that you haven't had to consider.
All right. So where can people find your work?
Sure. So all my stuff from Gallant Knight Games is available on our web store, shop.gallantknightgames.com, or on DriveThruRPG under Gallant Knight Games. Majority of our books are also available in your friendly local game store. Well, maybe not on the shelf, but they can probably order it if it's in stock with our distributor. My personal website is alanbahr.net. You can find links to all my other stuff there. Generally, I'm pretty bad at keeping it updated, but every week I'm trying to add more to it and get it going. Yeah, I think that's a bulk of it. You can find me on facebook.com/Northern Lights Foundry. That's my freelance imprint. So where I do contract work for other people. And so I tend to post there a lot about professional stuff. My podcast is Radio Free RPG. You'll be able to go there and you can listen to me interviewing other people in the game industry who aren't designers a lot of the time, and ask artists, editors. I've got some stuff coming out with like layout people and editors now. Trying to talk to other people who help make the games happen and what that's like for them. Because I know how to write and I know how to publish, but I don't know how to edit or layout, right? And so these insights are always helpful. You learn a lot. So that's kind of, I don't know.
That'd be a great resource for people that want to get into it, or where they can find you and get some of the other aspects of what it means to be in the industry.
If you're looking for a screaming deal, I don't know when this is going live, but currently, as of the 19th of April, there is a bundle of holding for a bunch of our Tiny D6 games where you get like $200 worth of games for like $40.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's going for another 2 weeks or so. It'll be into early May. So check out bundleofholding.com, see if it's still there.
Yeah, into early May. It'll make a perfect Mother's Day gift.
Right? Boom. I'll be at GameX in LA. I'll be at Gen Con. And then like the weekend after or before Gen Con, I'll be at Quills again.
Okay.
And probably some other cons. I don't know. I'm around. I'm not hard to find. I'm the tall guy who sometimes has a cane and beard.
So I'm going to be making it the first part of Quills, but I have to leaving on family events on Saturday, so I won't be there for the weekend part.
Well, we should make sure we sit down and talk.
Yes, definitely. We'll have to, as they say, we'll have to make sure we do a little bit of BarCon.
Yeah. And we should probably play a game this time. We didn't play any games last time I was out.
Okay. Sounds great. So
awesome.
That's where people can find your work and find you in the near future. I mean, I've enjoyed this. This has been a good talk to you. I mean, it's been a while since we've just chatted over strange things.
Yeah. Since October, probably.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but
I mean, that's probably what it was.
Yeah, it was. It was at the writers' retreat. So, and just kind of, it was interesting. The first time we met, you were introduced to me at LTUE, the Writing Symposium.
Yes.
And that was kind of in a passing as going, someone saw you and was with me and said, hey, here's,
Right.
and that was our first introduction. And that was about 10 years ago.
Would have been 2015 probably, yeah.
Yeah, because that was before Planet Mercenary came out, and you had in hand
The original Tiny Frontiers. Yeah, that was probably 2016 because I think we dropped that. I think that Kickstarter ran in 2015. And so trying to think now. LTU, it would have probably been 2016, yeah, because I think we ran the Kickstarter in like April of 2015. So yeah.
So that's for other people thinking about trying to get into these things. Get to this, the game shows, the writing symposiums, those sort of things. And you can make some great connections to help you kind of move things along. I think our relationship, even though it's been very professional, I mean, we haven't done anything really beyond what we've done at conferences and the one writing retreat. But it's been a great motivation for me, and I hope what I've done has helped you.
It definitely has.
Yep. Because I'm like you. I was looking this up just the other day. I first started writing reviews for games in February of 2012.
Wow. So just coming off 10 years.
Yeah. So
11. Yeah. Wow.
And I right after I started, that's when I picked up writing game reviews for Utah Geek Magazine.
Okay. Yeah.
So
there you go.
And that's how I started getting introduced to your stuff. So it's been a lot.
Well, I'm glad it's been a positive experience for you.
Yep, it has been. So we've been going for just under an hour.
Yep.
So we'll just go ahead and wrap it up and thank everybody for joining us with this chat with Alan Bahr. Hopefully you got something out of it. I'm asking people, please subscribe to the channel. I'm not really worried about making money from it, but I do know some people, and sorry, Alan, but I do know some people that are under contractual agreements that they cannot do interviews unless the channel can show a certain amount of activity. So I'm trying to get to that.
I'm not one of them. Sorry.
That's why I said sorry.
But I'm going to add that now, though.
Start asking people, how many subscribers do you have?
Just speak to my agent. Who's your agent? It's me. I just wanted to pretend I was important.
It's one of those interesting things when I reach out to people I can talk to and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. They go, oh, I can't do that. It's like, whoa, okay.
That's it. I would never have thought of that as a requirement to put on people, I suppose. But I guess it makes sense if you're working on certain things and time is valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. When you start getting, when there are certain people that have won some very prestigious awards in the film industry.
Yep.
Those little like statue men, then they start going,
right, because anybody and their pet would want to interview them. So
yep. So you have to kind of
makes sense. Yeah.
But thank you again, and like I said, hope this was good for everybody. And if you want to see some reviews of Gallant Knight Games, Tiny D6 games, other games that Alan has done, check out the blog at Guildmaster Gaming. You can go through my website, guildmastergaming.com. And thank you again, Alan. Have a great day.
My pleasure. You too.